If you have followed the rules but feel unsatisfied with where that's gotten you, this podcast is for you.
We'll help you learn how to reach your goals through creativity, intuition, and flow.
Welcome to the Flow into Authenticity podcast.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How is everyone today?
I'm jazzed.
Jazz.
That's
Jazz
an excellent
hands.
word.
I'm DJ Jazzy Jeff over here. I'm jazzed.
Awesome.
Esther.
I'm good. It's sunny here in Seattle, so that's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah, just don't step outside. You'll freeze your toes off.
It's cold.
I
There's
know.
snow. It's
Ugh,
very
I know.
cold. It's very cold.
I had a what the fuck moment this morning. I'm not going to lie. When I saw the snow at the end of February. So,
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure there are people in the Midwest and,
I know,
and the
I
Northeast who are like, oh my God, these
Yeah.
ladies are whiners.
I
But-
know.
But what can you do? We're not used to it. We're not used to these long, cold winters.
It's why I don't live in the Midwest. So when I see that shit, I'm like, no.
Yes. So we're all a little cold, but we're doing good. And I know I'm excited to talk about our topic today. We're going to talk about finding time. And I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, it's a great. I did a poll of my followers and my newsletter people, and they told me that this was one of their main issues that they struggle with is finding time in their life to pursue their hobbies, their interests. And I work with a lot of creatives, so that means, their art. But whatever it is for you, like, how do you find time in your schedule?
Yes. And this is a general issue that people are concerned with, finding time for things they want to make time for. But it totally relates to what we were talking about last time with getting inspiration, finding inspiration. If you're just maxed out, bouncing from like picking up the kids and dropping them off and going to work and doing this meeting and that meeting and doing this thing and that thing, getting all the dishes done, you're not going to be in a space where you can find inspiration and play with ideas, play with things. Maybe play is a physical thing for you. So that's why it's really important that we talk about making time. And I want to back up even further and talk about why it's important to make time for play. And that's because we were talking in episode 2 about feeling stuck and identifying where you're feeling stuck in your work or maybe in your home life, any area of your life where you might be feeling stuck. And the only way to kind of get out of that is to start to play around with what things could look like or how things could be different. And you do need time for that. So how do you make that time to be in open mode, to be in a reflective and playful mode? So, Esther, do you want to get us started thinking about how to conceptualize making time and why it's important, how we can give ourselves permission to make time, all of the above?
Oh, yeah. We talked about giving ourselves permission last time, and I love that idea. And just so you know, y'all, I just made a YouTube video about this. So if you find me on YouTube, we'll put a link to that in the show notes here. And you can go and watch that whole video about finding time. And so what I like to tell people is that really, there's so many books and so many videos out there about like how to hack your calendar, how to hack your brain, all these productivity kind of hacks, which that's okay. But for me, I think we really have to back up and we really have to do this mindset shift of giving ourselves permission to put these things first. And okay, I have this quote, and I just want to read this quote first because it'll kind of put us in the mood. It's more geared towards women. So if you're not a woman, this applies to you too. But I think for women or for people who've been raised female gendered, there's a lot of pressure on us to be kind of taking care of other people or doing things for other people. So let me read this quote. And it's from Clarissa Pinkola Estes in the book Women Who Run with Wolves. I've seen women insist on cleaning everything in the house before they could sit down to write. And it's a funny thing about house cleaning. It never comes to an end. Perfect way to stop a woman. A woman must be careful to not allow over-responsibility or over-respectability to steal her necessary creative rests, riffs, and raptures. She simply must put her foot down and say no to half of what she believes she should be doing. Art is not meant to be created in stolen moments only. And I think, this applies to not just art, but whatever we are passionate about, whatever we want to find that we are passionate about, right? If we don't know yet.
Right. If you're stealing moments, how are you going to get into flow?
Yeah.
And how are you going to allow yourself to that freedom to start creating and get into that kind of mind zone where you lose track of time?
Yeah.
You can't do that in stolen moments.
No, you cannot.
Yeah. And so it really takes this mindset shift. And here's where I'll go a little bit into the neuroscience. So our brain is a focusing mechanism, right? It takes in information and it filters it, and it basically really kind of conserves energy. It has this system called the reticular activating system. And so whatever we are focusing on, it actually gives us this perspective shift to help us kind of figure out a way to make that work and to find the time, right, for that thing. So in this kind of reticular activating system, we are what they call value tagging. So we're saying to our brain, other people or the housework is more important than my creative play or my exploration of what's important to me or the time that I need for myself. Okay. So other people or the housework is more important, and you're value tagging that in your brain. So what your brain does is it just goes into this kind of filtering mode, and it says, okay, other people are more important. So this is what we're going to do first. Right. And you're saying to your brain that this is what's important. So what we need to do is we need to tell our brain through this reticular activating system, we need to value tag and do this mindset shift. And I'm going to give you a little bit of story about my own way that I did this. So once we tell our brain that this play and exploration that we actually need in order to get to the next step out of our stuckness, right? Or whatever the time that you need in your life, creating more time is important to you. And I'm going to give you some examples. But when you tell your brain that, in your subconscious, it's going to shift, do this little shift. And in your subconscious, it's going to make the connections to find the time for you. So it's going to find that time. So do y'all want me to go ahead and go into my story of how I did this for myself?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I feel like I'm talking a lot. For
No.
Okay.
I want to hear what this looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So when I was an illustrator, I had a lot of clients. I was a designer. I had clients on the East Coast. I had a lot of clients. So because I was raised to put other people first, and that in my mind, my work, my creative work was not as important. It wasn't actually making money, because that's a big thing, right? For a lot of people, if we don't know what the outcome's going to be and what our next step is going to be, it lower down on the rung, right? So for me, it was painting. So my creative, this play and exploration that I was trying to find time for was my painting, but it wasn't bringing any income in. So I had to create time in my schedule for that. But in my mind, because it wasn't making money yet, it was lower down. It wasn't value tagged. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What was higher up value tagged was my clients because they were bringing in money. And so I had clients on the East Coast. I had to get up early and I had to prioritize them. So everything in my mind, because I was always conditioned to prioritize other people, prioritize all the money that was coming in, right? So my reaction was always like, I can't make time for myself because I have to get up and just hop on the computer and respond to these emails. I have to work on the weekend. I have to respond to the emails as soon as they send them to me. I have to be a good girl, right?
Mm-hmm,
So basically, you had like zero boundaries with your clients.
Zero boundaries at first because I was really in reaction mode. I was in fight or flight almost, in trying to run a business and conditioned to give everybody else what they need.
Right.
Okay. So I was value tagging other people. So I had to start, and it's funny. I had this conversation with my coach and I said, I don't procrastinate. I'm not a procrastinator.
Well, you procrastinate taking care of yourself. Sorry.
No, that's exactly what she said to me. She said, you procrastinate on your own things. But why? A lot of it's because I didn't know the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary to put that yourself first when you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Right? And I have this conversation a lot with my clients.
And that's true of play. Whenever you're playing,
Yep.
you don't have a goal where you're like, okay, I'm going to play and this is going to be the outcome.
Right.
So that's a necessary ambiguity in that type of process.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult shift. It's a difficult shift because uncertainty is like, whoa,
It's so hard. So what did you do, Esther? Ask me what I did.
Esther, what did you do?
Okay. So I like to tell my clients, we have to build the capacity to trust ourselves. So this is kind of trauma-informed language. We're not asking you to just all of a sudden put yourself first and, become like the self-centered person, right? I had to start really slow. So my first thing was, I don't work on weekends. Okay. That was really big. I don't work on weekends. So putting in boundaries.
And how did you communicate those boundaries to your clients?
Good question.
Did you make that clear to them or that was just internal?
No, I said, I don't work on weekends now. Because they ask for hours sometimes. Well, what are your hours now? Or I would just tell them, I'm available now.
So it was important for you to set expectations.
Yes. Very clear expectations.
Clear expectations.
Yeah. So my next step was, I don't respond to emails right away. I didn't say that to them, but I wouldn't respond like a knee-jerk reaction, right? And then the next one, which was really big, was I took 3 hours in the morning and I used that 3 hours for myself.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. Because I would always look at these artists and like these people online and they would be like, oh, I get up and I have my coffee and I write or I paint, and I would be so jealous.
You want to cut a bitch when you see that.
Oh my gosh. And what do you do in your mind? I can't do that because I can't do that because I can't do that because.
Well, and Esther, honestly, if you're a parent,
Yeah.
you really can't do that.
Yeah.
But, there's something else that you can do.
Yes. So I want to talk to you both about that next, because I know a lot of parents who they work around this. So after my coach told me that, I put that boundary in place and I said, I'm not working in these mornings, and since then I've created in my schedule these chunks of time in the morning, and in the morning, because that's when I have most of my energy. Okay.
That's what I was going to ask. Did you identify the morning as that is the best time for you to engage in your creativity?
Yeah. I have another YouTube video that talks about like finding energy. So when is your best time to find that energy to do that creative play?
That is so important. I used to make the mistake of putting my writing and research time like at the end of the day on a Friday.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So
how often did that get done? Yeah, so it got done like maybe 10% of the time, and the rest of the time I was like, nah, I don't really have to do this.
And Allison and I are writing a book together, and we've experienced this because our writing time now switched to the afternoon, and it's like, oh gosh, I'm so tired. It's harder, right? It's harder to do.
It's way harder. Yeah. We push through.
Yeah, so who wants to go next? We're going to talk about
creating boundaries, which is something that you touched. I mean, you talked a lot about creating those boundaries with your clients. I know that Leslie has figured out a cool technique for creating boundaries. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. And I just want to bridge kind of what Esther was saying. It sounded like in her experience, she had to create clear boundaries with her clients, but she also had to create clear boundaries with herself too. And I think that there are some boundaries that we need to express to those around us, and the others, it's about keeping kind of a contract with ourselves. And
yes,
the mix of that has been very important to me in trying to find time. I will share a story. The first time I met with my therapist 4 years ago, she wrote me this note card at the end of our session, and it said, and I still carry it around, "My needs and wants are as important as everyone else's." So this is something that I struggle with a lot. I am a mom. I have one kiddo, and I'm married.
How old is he now?
He's 14. So he's a freshman in high school. So we're bridging into that independence thing, but he doesn't have his license. And I am not working right now because I have had all these medical complications over the last few years, and I kind of call myself a professional patient. So my job is kind of managing all these appointments, and my husband, he works full time and he has a very busy schedule too. So we're always kind of balancing all these things, and my kiddo is in all these extracurriculars and stuff. So we kind of live and die by our family calendar. We kind of joke, like, if it's not on the calendar, it's not happening, because it's too hard to figure out who needs to be where and who's picking up who and who's the driver and who, oh, wait, you have a meeting, you can't go,
Wait, Leslie, I want to highlight that. If it's not on the calendar, it's not happening. That really resonates. So once you know that about the power of the calendar,
right,
you can do something with it.
And I always tell my clients, like, put it on the calendar, because if you don't have it on the calendar, then
it's not happening.
It goes along. It tells your brain. That's with the value tagging.
Right. It's like a literal value
tagging. Yeah.
I mean, you're typing it out and your brain could receive it input multiple ways, right? So I started doing that with my writing. It started with me, Esther, what you said about not, giving yourself time with your painting, even though you weren't getting income. That really resonates with me with my writing, because I'm kind of just starting out. So I don't have any income from my writing. But like any craft, it takes time. So you have to put in time to build up your practice and find your voice and all of these things, right? I hesitate to say the word good because I don't really think that that's relevant, but just working on your craft, that takes time. So I had to start with giving myself permission. And part of that was putting it on the calendar. So I would write Leslie writing on the calendar, whether it was just me writing or whether it was a class that I was taking. And I kind of had to train my family to respect that time because they weren't used to me. I had to also learn this idea that just because someone might not immediately respect your boundary, it doesn't mean that they won't.
Right.
It's because if they're always used to you being like, let's say you're the person that cooks dinner and you cook dinner every single night, and then all of a sudden you just stop cooking dinner, it's fair for them to be like, what's changed? Where's the right? That doesn't necessarily mean they're being a jerk. It's just
you've trained
their brain is accustomed. You've trained them. This is how you've set up your life. So that shift, I like to remind our listeners, like, it's okay that there's going to maybe be some adjustment time in your life. When you start putting that stuff on the calendar, you might get a little pushback, and it don't allow the people that are impacted by that some acceptance time and growth time with it too, but keep going. Like, don't let that deter you from creating that boundary.
Well, you're training them, right? You're training them, and they're going to make mistakes as they're being trained not to expect you.
So I would do that. I put the time on the door. I have a little sign that I hang on the outside of the door. A couple times my son would pop in or my husband would pop in, and I kind of would get really mad at first, and I had to talk myself out. I would get really mad. And then I was like, okay, then I had to listen to my own advice of like, okay, we're all adjusting here. But I just reiterated, like, this is my time. This is really important to me. This is how I feel connected to myself, and I deserve this time. And so, I had to sort of model that. And I feel like it's a good thing to model as a parent, which it's kind of counterintuitive because you think you owe your existence to your child, right? But you don't.
Oh, no.
You owe your existence to yourself. And it's a much better model if they see you taking care of yourself and tuning into yourself.
Yes.
That's a great point. I imagine that people who had mothers, let's say, who were completely devoted to them and did not take care of their own needs, I bet people in that situation have a harder time allowing time for themselves when they get older.
Yes. And that kind of leads into the next thing of boundaries, and also this idea, especially for people who are caretakers of whether it's children or other people in their household, about asking for help.
Yeah, so I just want to say, Allison and I were talking about you, Leslie, and how beautifully you state things, like how beautiful your voice is in how you talk about things and the words that come out of your mouth. And
wow.
We were talking about you, because we were listening to the previous episode together, and what you said about this is how I connect to myself, and I deserve to have this. So beautiful and so impactful. And I think what parents don't understand is that they're modeling for their kids what their kids are going to become. And so if they are constantly giving, constantly not doing anything for themselves, which is what our culture teaches, that their kids are also going to not be able to have that time for themselves. So what you are doing, and I have to say that Leslie is such a good mom, like such a good mom. Like I've watched you and your parenting, and it's so, so beautiful. And, you taking a stand and being like, I am going to do this for myself, and this is important to me, and I'm pursuing that. I wish my mom had done that for me and role modeled that, and maybe I wouldn't have struggled so much. You know what I mean? And so, to all the parents out there, and even non-parents, it's like, what you're doing now is you are changing the narrative for everybody who comes after you. And you are being a role model to what is possible, because when we share our gifts, that is what's going to change the world. And that is what's going to make us feel more fulfilled. So your kids are going to have that satisfaction and fulfillment in their life,
Yeah.
So
yes. Oh gosh.
Scene.
Making me cry, Esther.
It's not only true for parents.
Right.
When I was the chair of my department, I put a schedule on my door saying, oh, this is the time you can't find me because I'm off somewhere in an undisclosed location working on my research. And some of my faculty members told me, I really appreciated that you did that, because it made me feel like I then had permission to do something similar with my students and put some boundaries around my research time with my students.
And even when I was a creative director, there's this whole culture around working through the lunch break, just staying at your desk. And so when I would take breaks, and take walks, people would say to me like, okay, that helps me to be able to leave my desk, which is so sad, but like, it's true.
Yes.
Because you're shifting the culture.
Yeah, exactly.
And you could be doing that in your work, or you could be doing that at home, shifting the culture. Yeah.
And we need it.
Yes. And it does take retraining. When you were talking about training your son and your husband to respect the sign on the door, it made me picture a little puppy, because I've trained a couple of puppies. And, a puppy gets into a plant. So I used to have a plant that my puppy really liked to dig the dirt out of. And you don't like go crazy when you see the puppy digging in the plant and go, oh my God, you're such a bad dog. Because it doesn't work. What you need to do is like calmly take the puppy, put him somewhere else, and you have a whole routine like, okay, this is a boundary. You're not supposed to dig up the dirt in the plants. So this is what you do instead. And it's just part of training people or puppies to respect boundaries. And it's not selfish. Like, I wasn't selfish for telling my puppy not to dig up this plant, right? It's just like, okay, you need to be trained not to do this.
Yep.
That's such a good point. I think for people reacting to their boundaries that they set up, and just being calm and stepping back. And I think going back to the role model thing that we talked about either last time or the time before, of finding role models who have done this, and how can I step into my worth and really recognize that I can do this too.
Yeah.
And look at people who have done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Allison, do you want to share with us how you have done this in your life and created a schedule?
Yes. So I have a hard time with setting boundaries at home because I am married to a wonderful man, musician, very talented musician, who's a stay-at-home dad. And we have 2 kids, 3.5 years old and 20 months old. And he is just absolutely devoted to them. He takes the hit at night. Like last night, he only got 3 hours of sleep, and it wasn't even a continuous 3 hours of sleep. And he's taking care of the kids all day to day. So I can't say, James, I need this boundary. Like, I need this time for myself. And I know you've already worked 12 hours with the kids, but I need you to work 14 hours with the kids today. Like, that's not realistic. And I would just feel absolutely terrible if I did that. So what the alternative was for us is asking for help. So I can't set a boundary with my family, but I can get some help. So this amazing, amazing thing happened last week. My son is in preschool and had a really hard time adjusting to school after being kind of locked down for the pandemic, for all of the life that he remembers having. So had a really hard transition, but had this teacher who he really bonded with. And she ended up leaving his class to go work in my daughter's class a couple months ago. So not only did she bond with my son, but now she's been bonding with my daughter. And last week, she just happened to mention to my husband, oh, by the way, if you ever need a babysitter. And we're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. So I freaked out immediately when I heard this, and we got her contact information as soon as we could. And the moment I got it, even though I was supposed to be in a meeting or something, I texted her. I was like, oh my God, can you please babysit? Oh, this is going to be amazing. So we decided that we could find the budget to hire her one night a week. And let me just tell you, my husband and I have had probably an average of 2 date nights a year since my son was born 3.5 years ago. So now...
So you are overdue for this.
Yes, we are going to have a babysitter one night a week. And this could be for a date night. This could be for my husband finally gets a big block of time where he could make music. And maybe I finally get a time where I could go out with some childless friend for dinner. Esther's raising her hand. Yes, that would be awesome. I could go over to Esther's house and we could, I don't know. What would we do? I don't even know what we would do.
Thing. When you get the time,
we could
at first you're like,
play.
Oh, yeah.
Play with paint. Well,
there you go.
There's a couple things that I want to just mention about this. It's so beautiful because this is such a great example of a couple things. One being, I love that we have 2 parents and they're both in different times. And then me, who's childless, right? And this just shows you we're all in different places in our life, right? And so
yes.
when you have 2 little babies at home,
Mm-hmm.
you have to do kind of some drastic things and you're not going to be able to find big chunks of time. I know some people who wake up really early, like 5 a.m., but like when they're that young, you're just going to be exhausted all the time. And like Glennon Doyle says, like maybe you have 1 minute to like reconnect to yourself, you know, and that's it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. It's so beautiful. And I like to tell people that we always think that we have to figure out all these things on our own. And, you know, we have to just always try to figure everything is all on us. But it seems like life gave you that opportunity.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It was magical.
Yes. And it was like this
Also-
Mary Poppins type person. And you said
Totally.
yes.
Yeah. You were open to it.
This is the thing. You could have said no
Mm-hmm.
if you hadn't shifted your value. Do you know what I mean? You could have said no.
Yeah, because it's expensive hiring a babysitter.
Yeah.
So we could just like suck it up and not
Yeah.
spend the money and just run
Yeah.
ourselves ragged like we've
Which
been
I think
doing.
most people do.
Yep.
Mhm.
Because that's what we're conditioned to do. That's what we think
Yeah.
it is. That's life. Oh, well, this is just hard. You know, this is just
Yeah.
having young children. This is just how it is.
My parents did it. So, yeah.
Right. This
Yeah.
all goes back to this. You deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve this for yourself. You deserve this as a couple. Like all of that stuff you deserve to explore and
Yeah.
play in.
And when we do that value tagging of shifting, like, actually, this is what I want, this is what I deserve. Look at life goes, oh, is that what you want? Here you go. Here's a Mary Poppins for you.
Right.
Mhm.
And you know what's funny? We actually looked into hiring someone
Mm-hmm.
several months ago, but we couldn't find someone. And then we were worried, like, oh, COVID exposure. Like, we don't want to bring yet another person into our world since our kids obviously are unvaccinated at their ages. But my little maskless, unvaccinated 20-month-old is already spending 3 days a week with this woman.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's amazing.
And this is what
Yeah.
I'm talking about, going back to the value tagging, right? It's like
Mhm.
you already said, this is what I want. So you said, this is what I want. And you started looking for it.
Yeah.
So you showed your brain, this is what I want. But it's like your brain on the subconscious level mixed with the universe and life. I don't know how it works, you guys. I'm not. It found a solution for you. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
saying, like, your brain can do it on the subconscious level
yeah.
and be open to the magic when it comes.
Yeah, and we really primed ourselves to be open to that
Yes.
opportunity.
Primed your
Because we
brain.
had
Yeah.
already started kind of looking a while back. So
Yeah.
we kind of had it in our heads like, oh, okay, we could figure out how to budget for this.
Yep. That's how it works.
And so when the opportunity came up, we were like, oh yeah, okay.
Mhm.
So we already did the work in our brains to realize we could make money come out of thin air for this.
Yeah.
That's how it works. That's
Yep.
a great example.
So just like what you were saying earlier, Esther, about the brain just being this focus mechanism, right? It's like you just changed the filter, right? It'll just let your brain,
Yes.
like it just changed the filter. And then you were ready to have that input and see it and accept it.
Yes. I love the word priming
Yes.
because that's what it really is.
Mhm.
I have another example where I know I've told you this before, but like a few years when I started doing the painting and making time, I actually decided that I wasn't going to cook dinner. So I stopped cooking dinner and I didn't know, like, how am I going to find food for, my husband and I? And it was one of those things that I always thought that I had to cook dinner, but my husband actually didn't really care.
Mhm.
It was one of those things, like my brain thought that I had to do this, but I actually
Uh-huh.
didn't, right?
Yes.
And so I
Right.
cut it out. And so my brain went into this, okay, how do we find a solution? And it turns out we lived like just kind of up the road from a store where you could go and they had a salad bar and a hot food bar. And so that was the solution that came up. And it's like,
Yeah.
it came to us as we kind of just were open to the solution. And it was really great for a while until we moved, until COVID, you know?
Yeah. That's like a perfect example of you identified what was making you feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were open to this inspiration, and then here it is. Like you figured out this thing. So it's like, that's a perfect illustration of the whole process.
I love all of our stories. I think this is really going to help people out there who feel like they are stuck and they are struggling to find time. Any other suggestions from busy moms to, I know, Allison, you wrote an article about finding
making
time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I wanted to start with kind of that big mindset shift, but on the practical level, if anybody has, you know, definitely mark it in your calendar. That's number one.
Yes,
practical.
Absolutely.
I always tell my clients that. It's something that I work really hardcore with my clients on. I have to do that myself too, is like put it in the calendar and value tag that for your mind.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Not only are you putting it in the calendar for yourself, but you're setting the expectation with anyone else who might need to monopolize your time, that they have this boundary that they have to respect. Yeah, so I did write an article. I wrote a blog post for the Math Values blog about finding time for creativity, because doing math research requires you to be in this like creative open mode, and you definitely want to give yourself an opportunity to get into kind of a flow state with your work. And it's really hard to do when you're having students pop by your office and you're trying to plan your lecture for the next day, or class activity, or writing an exam, or going to some really boring or stressful meeting. And so I gave people a number of tips. So first of all, one of my tips was go to a different place. So maybe when you're doing all this stuff, putting out fires, doing all these daily tasks that you need to do, you might be in a certain place. Maybe it's an office or an area in your house. And if you want to get into a creative open mode, it helps to be in a different location. And I know this is important for you, Esther, with your studio. Esther converted a how many car garage?
6-car garage.
A 6-car garage into a studio. And I can't imagine you even attempting to work on art in your house. Like, that would be really weird, right? Do you do art in your house?
Not anymore, although I've been thinking about it because it's so cold out there and we haven't found a really good heating solution. But yeah, this is really important to me. And actually, John Cleese, who coined the term open mode, he talks about finding space.
Yes.
And I work with my clients on this, is finding space.
Physical space.
A physical space that feels good. It's really important to even create just even like a tiny little corner of your room. You can go on YouTube and watch how I manifested my studio if you want to. But even before I had that, made sure I created a space in my office that was really cozy and felt really good to me. So that's really important.
Very important. Another thing is, so you're creating physical space, but you also have to create mental space. So one thing I recommended is just doing like a quick breathing exercise when you get into your space, and also setting a timer. Because I know for me, I'm like always watching the clock if I don't have a timer set. Like, oh, is it time for me to go? Oh, is it time for that next meeting? But if you set an alarm or a timer, then you can kind of get lost in time in a way. So you breathe, clear your mind of all of the, nagging things like, oh, I shouldn't have said that in that meeting. What are people going to think about me? Or, oh my gosh, I have this student who's really making my life terrible. And how am I going to respond to that situation? There are all these things that could be messing with your head. And so just taking some time to breathe and do a super quick meditation to clear your mind, that can help. And what else? Gosh, those might be the main things. So putting it on your calendar, changing your space, clearing your head with a quick breathing meditation, setting a timer. And those are basically just opening up this mental and physical space for you to be able to think creatively. Yep. Anything I'm missing? What would you add to that list?
I would just mention that a good amount of time for getting in flow is like 90 minutes for exploration. So we're talking about when you're doing exploration into like what is going to be next for you. Like what are your hobbies? What are the things you're passionate about? What gets you into flow, right? Your passions, what excites you, what inspires you. And if you can create like 3 90-minute chunks per week.
That might be totally unachievable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the ideal.
That's ideal.
So if you can create even like a half an hour, a couple times a week,
yeah,
that would be good. So I'm just talking about getting into flow, right?
Right.
That would be kind of my suggestion for that.
Yeah. Or take the average of 30 and 90 and you get 60.
Well, yeah, I don't want to discourage anyone who feels like that chunk of time like is obtainable, excuse me.
Yeah.
Because that can be aspirational, maybe.
Yes.
Exactly.
And don't be discouraged if only this week you can get 10 minutes. Like, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not going to get into flow in 10 minutes, but you can do something that's moving you forward towards your goal.
Getting that shift, right? Getting to the filter to where you can start receiving all this input of how, oh yeah, actually I can do this. Oh, I can let that go. Oh, I do deserve that,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I always like to say, like, make the intention. And there's a couple things that I want to say about that. It's like, one thing that you can do is take a class. A lot of people work differently. Like, if you take a class, that could be really good for a lot of people. Or doing like a challenge, right? Like a lot of people do challenges on Instagram, and that way you can kind of get into learning. Like a lot of times when we're in this play stage, you're exploring your passions. You're either taking a class or you're kind of working on learning something, right? And seeing if you like it. So we're exploring our passions. And the other thing I wanted to say is creativity, when we're exploring and playing, it's a process. So we're not always producing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just daydreaming. It's just looking at inspiration. It's going for a walk and looking at the flowers and the colors. And so that's what I like to tell people when they feel pressure.
Right. If you've ever had an interesting idea in the shower, you know that all it takes is 5-10 minutes for you to kind of open your brain to some new ideas.
And it's getting in that open mode. If you're a parent, what would it look like to sit down with your kids and play and get inspiration from that?
Oh, yeah. My husband gets so much musical inspiration from playing instruments with the kids and hearing the fun songs that my kids make up. So, yeah, that's a huge source of inspiration for him.
I want to give a shout out to James. Her husband did the music, the beautiful music for our show, too. So he's the musician behind our music.
Yes, it's beautiful. I'm so lucky to be married to such a wonderful musician. So I'm really happy that we have found a way to give him more time for making music. But yeah, he's been really adept at stealing those moments and figuring out how to work himself some music time while he's taking care of the kids.
That's amazing.
So yeah, you can be strategic.
Yeah, Leslie, do you have any last tips for people finding time from a mom who's has an older kid?
Yeah. Take it in chunks. Like, it's okay if it's slow. It's okay if it isn't consistent just keep working toward it. Just keep telling yourself it's okay to prioritize it. And so that definitely keeping it on the calendar. If you're just getting started with this idea, be gentle with yourself, be gentle with the people around you, and just be clear and be consistent, and it will happen.
Yeah.
You will start to see the shift and you will become very motivated by what happens, and it will become easier to carve out that time.
That reminds me of an article I read a month or two ago about someone who is trying to start working out, someone who's trying to start running, and this person was not a runner at all, and they challenged themselves to run 1 minute a day.
Yeah. I mean, and I say that to people who maybe, have physical limitations or neuroatypical, all these things. Like, this is accessible for everyone. And it's okay to take it at 1 minute a day. It's absolute. You will get there. You might have to have a little more patience with yourself and accept that it might take you more time. Try not to get into the comparison trap.
Yeah.
But you can do it. And it's okay to take it in these bite-sized chunks.
And this is coming from two people with serious health issues, right? And I think I'm pretty neurodivergent. I've never been diagnosed, but yes. So I love that, Leslie. That's so beautiful. And that it really ties into our 4%, right? So the little chunks, so that skills challenge ratio that we talk about at the end of every episode, it's like, what is the 4% challenge that you can give yourself? So what do we have for our listeners if they have felt stuck, they're trying to get into finding inspiration, finding what's next, finding that play and exploration of their passions, of what they're excited about. And then they have to kind of find the time for that, right? So what is the 4% that we can give them?
Right. I think we have talked a lot about creating boundaries and asking for help. And I know, Leslie, you're going to tell us that the prerequisite for that is giving yourself permission. Can you remind us what is on that card that your therapist gave you?
Yes. My needs and wants are just as important as everyone else's.
Okay, so maybe that's step one for some people who have trouble even giving themselves permission to even entertain the idea of setting a boundary. So maybe you need to write that on a card. Maybe you need to put that up on a sticky note next to your computer, whatever you need to do. And then the next step is figuring out, how are you going to set a boundary or ask for help in order to create time?
Yeah. So make it really small. So just remember, when I started out, I could only just say no to weekends, right? I didn't start with the 3 hours in the morning. That's a lot. Yeah. So we have to balance our nervous system and how much we can regulate ourselves and our capacity. So start with something small. Remember, it's just 4%. So whether it's saying no or putting something in the calendar or hiring somebody to do something, not making dinner, whatever it is.
Yeah. Ask your partner, say, I need an hour on Mondays. Can we make that work? Whatever that is, start that conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe that's even what it is too. Just have the conversation. If it's, you live with someone and you need to figure that time split out.
Or maybe it's even looking for those role models who have done it before. It could be us. Like looking at role models who have done what you have done, the people that you're jealous of. Like I was jealous of the people in the morning who are like having their coffee and painting, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And maybe it's like your example, Esther, of, maybe you're used to cooking every night for your family. And maybe it's one night a week you're going to get takeout. Yeah. And that's going to be your night where you get an hour of time to just play and explore for yourself. Yep. All right. Well, sounds good. We want to remind listeners, if you like what you're hearing, please like, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. Recommend the podcast to a friend. We hope you enjoy what you're hearing and are getting some value out of this. And Esther, you want to tell us about your coaching availability as well?
Yeah. And just a reminder, you can go to my YouTube channel, which we'll link below, and look at those videos for more help on this subject. And also you can go to my website, flowintoauthenticity.com, for more information about coaching, and you can follow me on Instagram at Esther Loopstra Art.
Wonderful.
And we will talk to you next time.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Flow into Authenticity is hosted by Esther Loopstra, Leslie Blumenstein, and me, Allison Henrich. Our original theme music is by James Wetzel. Podcast editing is by Dave Visaya. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Flow into Authenticity from your favorite podcast app.